The day Amanda's body began to swell, she was wearing the same dress she bought with the money. It started with her stomach, then her legs, then her face. The doctors in Lagos ran every test they knew. Malaria. Negative. Kidney failure. Negative. Liver damage. Clean. Typhoid. Nothing. One young doctor pulled her file, flipped through the pages twice, and scratched his head slowly. "Madam," he said carefully, "medically there is nothing wrong with you. But something is clearly wrong with you." Amanda lay on the hospital bed staring at the ceiling with dry eyes. 3 months ago she had been laughing. 3 months ago she had felt rich for the first time in her life. She had stood in front of her bathroom mirror in a brand new dress and told her reflection that she had finally arrived. Now the dress was tight in places it had no business being tight. Now let us go back to where it all started. Amanda grew up in Lagos, but her roots were buried deep in Oguta, a quiet community in the east where her mother's family had farmed the same land for 4 generations. The land was not large. It was not flashy. But it sat on a corner of the village that caught the morning sun perfectly, and the soil there was dark and rich, and it had fed the family through drought and hunger and war. Her father died when Amanda was 12. A brief illness that moved too fast for the hospital to catch. Her mother raised her alone after that, working double shift as a seamstress, cutting and sewing other people's celebrations just to pay Amanda's school fees. They were not rich, but they were never completely hungry. And through every hard season her mother always returned to the same words like a prayer she could not stop saying. "Amanda, whatever happens in this life, that land in Oguta belongs to us. Your grandfather planted that land with his own hands. His father walked that soil before him. We do not sell it. We do not lease it to strangers. We protect it until we can pass it down. Do you hear me?" Amanda would nod the way young people nod when they are hearing but not listening. She graduated university with a second-class upper in business administration and landed an entry-level job at a logistics company on the island. She was sharp and everyone around her knew it. She worked harder than her mates, stayed later than her seniors, and dressed like she already had the promotion she was working toward. Within 2 years she had moved up twice. She relocated from a single room in Suraleh to a 1-bedroom flat in Lekki Phase 1, and she began to feel the gap between who she was and who she had always wanted to be closing slowly. Life was not perfect, but it was moving. She could feel it moving. Then she met Emeka. Emeka was the kind of man who entered a room and made every other man in it seem slightly less assembled. He was tall, spoke with the quiet confidence of someone who had never had to raise his voice to be heard, and drove a white Range Rover that always looked freshly washed even at night. He wore watches that cost more than Amanda's quarterly salary, and he smelled like money in the specific way that only people who have always had it do. He met her at a corporate networking event on a Friday evening and spent the entire night talking to no one else. By the time the event ended, he had her number, her attention, and something she was too smart to admit, her hope. They began seeing each other. Slowly at first, then all at once, the way these things always go. Emeka took her to restaurants she had only ever seen tagged on Instagram. He sent her flowers on random Tuesdays. He called her every night before she slept and every morning before she was fully awake. He made her feel like the most important woman in any room they entered together. Amanda, who had spent years being strong and self-sufficient and unbothered, quietly lowered every wall she had ever built. One evening Emeka took her to a rooftop restaurant overlooking the Lagos skyline. The city lights spread out below them like scattered gold. He reached across the table and held both her hands. "Amanda," he said, his voice low and serious, "I have never met a woman like you. I see my future when I look at you. I want us to build something real together." He paused. "There is a land deal in Abuja. A government allocation that closes in 3 weeks. The returns are 4 times the investment. I just need a capital partner I can trust. Someone I am building a future with. Amanda looked at him across the candlelight. She asked how much. 5 million naira, he said simply. And then he smiled a smile that had made her lower every wall. Amanda went home that night and sat on the edge of her bed for a long time. She thought about her salary. Not enough. She thought about her savings. Not nearly enough. She opened her banking app and stared at the numbers. Then she closed it. Then she opened it again. Then she thought about the land in Oguta. She told herself it was just land. Undeveloped. Sitting there doing nothing. Her mother was getting older. If she turned this 5 million into 20, she could buy the land back, build something on it, and give her mother a life she deserved. She told herself she was doing this for the family. She told herself a lot of things that night. She called the family lawyer the next morning without telling her mother. She asked quiet questions. The land was valued at 6.5 million naira. More than enough. She asked how long the process would take. The lawyer said 2 weeks if she was serious. She said she was serious. 3 weeks later the documents were signed and the money was in Emeka's account by Thursday morning. By Friday evening his number no longer existed. The Range Rover. Gone. The rooftop restaurants. Gone. The flowers on random Tuesdays and the late-night calls and the future he had described so clearly she had almost seen it with her own eyes. Every single piece of it. Gone. Amanda sat on her kitchen floor that Friday night and did not move for hours. She stared at her phone screen showing the last message she had sent him. The 2 blue ticks that had turned grey. The number that now said not available. She did not cry. She was too deep inside the shock to cry. She called her mother on a Sunday. She had rehearsed the words for 2 days, but when her mother picked up and said hello my daughter in that soft familiar voice, every rehearsed sentence dissolved. Mama, Amanda said. I have to tell you something. The silence after her confession was the worst sound Amanda had ever heard in her life. Worse than her father's funeral. Worse than anything. Her mother did not shout. She did not scream. She simply went very quiet in the way that a sky goes quiet before the kind of storm that uproots trees. Amanda, her mother finally said. What have you done? Not a question. A statement. Low and hollow and ancient. The line went dead. Her mother arrived in Lagos 4 days later looking smaller than Amanda remembered. Her eyes were swollen but she was calm in the terrifying way that only a woman who has cried herself empty can become. She sat across from Amanda in the small Lekki flat and she looked at her daughter for a long time before she spoke. That land is not just land, Amanda. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Your grandfather did not just farm that soil. He made covenants on that land. Our people have agreements on that ground that go back further than you and I can count. When your grandfather was dying he called the family together and said this land must never leave our hands. He did not say it like a preference. He said it like a warning. And you went behind my back and sold it to a stranger for a man you met at a party. Amanda opened her mouth. Her mother raised one hand. I am not here to argue. What is done is done. But our people say when you uproot what your ancestors planted, the roots will find you. They always find you. Amanda almost laughed. Almost. She wanted to say it was superstition. She wanted to say this was Lagos, not the village. She wanted to say a lot of things, but something in her mother's eyes that evening stopped every word in her throat. Her mother left the next morning without eating breakfast. 2 weeks later the swelling started. It began in her ankles one Tuesday morning. By Thursday it had moved to her stomach. By the following week her face was puffy and her fingers were so swollen she could not remove her rings. She went to the hospital. They ran tests. They ran more tests. They transferred her to a bigger hospital on the island and ran even more tests. Every result came back clean. Her organs were functioning. Her blood work was normal. There was no medical explanation for what was happening to her body. She lay in the hospital bed at night listening to the sounds of the ward, and she began to think about things she had spent her whole life refusing to think about. On the 5th night, a new night nurse came to check her vitals. She was an older woman, quiet and unhurried. She checked the chart, checked the drip, then stood at the foot of the bed looking at Amanda with an expression that was not quite pity and not quite recognition, but somewhere between the two. "Madam," the nurse said softly. "Where are you from?" Amanda told her. "Oguta." The nurse was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Have you offended your people?" Amanda turned her face to the window. The nurse did not press. She simply said, "Some things the hospital cannot touch." And she left the room. That night Amanda could not sleep. Around 2 in the morning she heard something. It was faint at first, like wind moving through grass. But there was no window open in the ward. The sound grew slowly until it was right beside her ear. It was not wind. It was a voice. Old and dry and patient, like soil that has been waiting a long time. It said one word. "Come." Amanda sat up in the darkness, her swollen hands gripping the bed rail, her heart hammering against her ribs. The ward was empty. The other beds were still. The monitors beeped quietly. Everything was exactly as it should be. Except at the far end of the ward, just beyond the last bed, something was standing in the shadow. And it was looking directly at her. Amanda opened her mouth to scream. And that was when the lights went out. Comment below, do you think Amanda will make it out? And should her mother forgive her? If you want part 2, drop a yes in the comments and make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss what happens next.